Hello, this is Faith at Catholic Unschooling Coach, and I thought today I would just try to talk more succinctly than I did last time about college, because a lot of times homeschoolers, unschoolers are worried about getting their kids into college. But before I talk about college, I want to just make sure that we all know you don't necessarily need to go to college. I think we've sort of developed this sort of class system where, I think this is one reason why so many kids are in debt now, because they were just pushed on this idea that going to college would make life better, and it didn't necessarily turn out. They've got all these crazy majors now anyway that may or may not lead to a job or a career, and they got into all this debt. And then it didn't pan out, and so many people are struggling with this debt, this huge debt. They're starting off life really, behind the eight ball, and it was because they were sold this idea that somehow it would all work out and that going to college is always good, and I don't think that's true at all, and I don't think it's necessary. Now, but it depends on what you want to do and how things work out in life and that sort of thing. One thing that I wanted to talk about, and the person to really, and you probably already know about him, is Mike Rowe. Mike Rowe is a real advocate for this, that blue-collar jobs, they're the jobs we really need to maintain our infrastructure. And a lot of college grads wind up just being paper pushers, where when the company has to tighten up, they get laid off, and there's no stability, and it's constantly changing the nature of the job. So now you're likely to have 3 different careers in your life. So it's not as stable as it used to be. Whereas we really, as a country, we really need people to work on our infrastructure. So we shouldn't have a classist idea that somehow if you do a hands-on trade, as they call it, then somehow that's beneath you. It isn't. It's something that we need. It's often more necessary than the white-collar stuff. But I recently read a book that I wish had come out when I had teenagers. It's called Durable Trades. I forget the name of the guy. Here it is. I read it on my Kindle. Durable Trades, Family-Centered Economies That Have Stood the Test of Time. And what this guy did was he went through all the different jobs. He calls them trades, but not all of them are trades really, or we don't consider them that anymore. And looked at how long they've been around and how stable they are and what kind of education you might need and how you would break into the field. And it's really, really interesting. And he lists all these. Let me see if I can find it's by Rory Groves. Should just turn the page. And he lists all the different trades. Like the number one was shepherd. Like humans have been shepherds for hundreds, thousands of years, and it still is pretty much essentially the same thing. People need food and they need wool, and that's been a constant. So he goes through and he comes up with his own rubric or metric for analyzing the different trades, how stable they are, how family-centered they are, how old they are, everything I said before. Really interesting, and it's an easy-to-read book that you could easily read with a teen, out over dinner or hand it to them and have them read it and then discuss it. So I recommend that book. I wish that it had been around when I was raising teens. Anyway, so that's the first thing. But if you do think college is on the horizon for your kids, or your kids have expressed overt interest, or you just think they're going to likely wind up going that way, or as my husband, liked to see it, he wanted, when our kids got to be 18, he wanted them to be able to easily go to college if they wanted to. And so when we did high school, I can't really tell you what it was like from an unschooling perspective. We unschooled up until about 7th or 8th grade, and then in 7th and 8th grade, it sort of got a little bit more formal. And then in high school, we did what I called collaborative, and maybe I'm just trying to put a fancy spin on it or a nice spin on it. But I called it collaborative because my oldest daughter did want to go to college. She knew that she wanted to go to college. When we were like, when she was 8 or something, we went to Williamsburg. We went on the Felicity tour, American Girl doll. And we were driving around the campus of William and Mary, and she said, "What's this?" You know, she was just so impressed by all these, young adults walking around this beautiful campus. And we said, "Oh, that's college. You can go there one day, and you study something that you want to do with your life." And she said, "Oh," so for a long time she wanted to go to William and Mary. Then she started going to youth retreats up at Steubenville. So she decided she wanted to go to Steubenville. So she applied for Steubenville and got in. But then at the very last minute, she went to visit her best friend who was a year older, who was at the University of Dallas, and she wound up applying and getting into the University of Dallas. But anyway, I'll go into that later. But what we did was, because she was my oldest, so I wasn't sure that I was going to homeschool through high school. I didn't think I could. I was absolutely terrified of it. But we did tours of various high schools, and we weren't feeling it. And so we decided, well, maybe we'll just try to do 9th grade at home. It doesn't work, then you can go to high school. And so she wanted a high school curriculum. But what we did was we just looked around at what was available in the community. Very luckily, in my area, we had a really nice high school co-op. And so she took classes. She did her science classes, and she did a couple literature classes through them. And then we also had she wound up waiting until senior year and taking 2 semesters of Spanish from the community college. That's how she got her languages. And then we had a math tutor, because I could not teach math to save my life. So she had a math tutor. So she did math that way. She did science through the co-op. She did some lit with the co-op, but I did a lot of history and literature at home. And my husband taught government and economics to them. So he did that. So that's how we did it. And so it was just sort of, we figured out what classes were available in the community, what could we do at home, and we just sort of worked it out like that. And so she sort of set the mold, and then the other kids followed. So that's the way it worked out for us. At different times there was different levels of enthusiasm, and but mostly, we would sit down and just plot it out. And sometimes they would want more input, and other kids just wanted me to give it to them. They didn't really want to think about it, and they knew I would take care of it, and that was fine. They had at least consented. They knew that they could say something if they wanted to. So that's how we did it. Now, I do know somebody who was unschooled through high school, and the way it worked out for her was she was really unschooled, and so she was very good she was a voracious reader. She was a good writer. She liked journaling. She liked writing stories and poems and that sort of thing. So that she had no problems with that. She was also into music. She sang in a choir for many years, and she studied the cello for many years. She also was involved in a co-op that did a lot of, once a week co-op that did a lot. They had a great community theater that she was involved in, and she did various other things. I think she sort of got science through that. Like, they would have science experiments or things. They would take a theme and they would study something. So she kind of got her science, I think, through that. And then she also was into fencing and track, because her father's a runner, and she would go running. All the kids got into running because of that. They'd go running with their dad all the time. So she got into track. There was a homeschool/Christian school track team. And she got into fencing. There was a homeschool fencing, too. So the 2 things she didn't have were math and languages. She would dabble in languages, but she would never get very far. Like, she'd 6 weeks trying to learn Russian, and then she would just give up and that sort of thing. So she never did anything formal with language, and she did not like math. So I think when she was 16 or 17, She volunteered to be an assistant, and I think the Catechesis of Good Shepherd, or maybe it was the actual Montessori school, but there is a Catholic school here that has a Montessori school. But it also has Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. Whatever it was, she got exposed to that, and she was volunteering, and she loved it. And so she decided that she wanted to become a Montessori teacher. And so they looked into it, and here on the East Coast, you have to have a college degree to become a Montessori teacher. So she decided she wanted to go to college, but she didn't have the math, so she had to take the SAT. They wanted her, if she was going to go to college, they wanted her to go to Catholic college. So, because she didn't want to live at home, I think. She wanted to be able to go away. So they said, well, you have to get scholarships. We can't afford to send you to private school unless we get help. And so she had to learn math. And I know this because they asked me, because my kids had math tutors, they asked me about the math tutor, and I recommended the math tutor that we used. And so that math tutor coached her for 9-10 months. Now, she had not had formal math before. And she got her ready to take the SAT. And it was very painful for her. I know she cried a lot, wanted to give up. But fortunately, the math tutor is a really encouraging, fun person, really understanding person, good teacher, good. So I think that really encouraged her. But she kept trying and trying, and then she took the SAT. She did okay, but she didn't do high enough. She didn't score high enough to get the scholarship that they were hoping for. So but I think she got into the school. I'm trying to remember. They were looking at various schools. She wound up going to Christendom. And Christendom waived the language requirement. They said it was okay. So she did take the SAT again after more coaching, and she did better, and she actually got the scholarship. She went to Christendom. This was several years ago. She's since graduated, and I've lost contact with the family. I've lost touch, so I don't know how it was going. But I know midway through, at least, she was loving it. She loved the Catholic atmosphere. And even though she'd been unschooled all her life, and Christendom is a very disciplined place. It's almost like a military academy. She was thriving. So you can unschool. And this leads me to my next point. If you want your kids to go to one of these Newman Guide Catholic schools, I'm going to tell you a secret. They really need students. If they think that you're a faithful Catholic, and they're going to let your kid in. I think they have a bias in favor of homeschoolers. And so I think they're open to the idea of unschooling Christendom. Think about Christendom. You think it's so, stiff collar, starchy, traditional, conservative, kind of military almost academy, and yet they were open to unschoolers. So I think these Newman Guide schools, if you can afford them, are the way to go. And you're Catholic, and your kid, your child wants to go to that kind of college, or that's the one you're willing to pay for. I think it's not that hard to get in, and my advice is just call their office, the admissions office, and find out what you need to do, and then just do it. Or have your teen call them and find out what to do, and then just do it. So I don't think that's that big of an obstacle. Now, another way to get into college, and this was, my youngest son was like this. He suffered from depression. When adolescence hit, his hormones went crazy, and he really suffered from depression. It was a really hard time, actually. And he blamed everything on being at home, and that if he was at school, he would be better off. His best friend, too, had started going to school, so he was lonely. He was having trouble making friends, and it was just an awful time. So he did go to 9th grade at the nearby Catholic high school. Well, it was a mixed experience, but he didn't really make any friends there, and he didn't like the learning. He had one teacher that he really liked, and he even said it was a mile wide and an inch deep. He just didn't, the quality of the learning of what they expected you to know, to him, wasn't very deep. So he came home for 10th grade, and he was still depressed, and we barely did anything 10th grade. I mean, I don't know what we did that year. It was really, really hard. I remember we were learning Latin together because my youngest daughter was there, and she was much more like academic and studious kind of personality. And so I remember we did Latin together. I couldn't get him to do chemistry that year. We barely did literature. He was really into animation at the time, so he did a lot with animation. And he was playing a lot of Super Smash Bros. It was a bad year. His 10th grade was a bad year. But then he started going, he dual enrolled in the community college. There was something about, maybe he was coming out of this dark tunnel that he'd been in, but it was something about going on the campus there and seeing all ages studying that he really liked it. It came at the right time for him. So we started taking classes. He never did a full semester, but he started taking classes, and eventually he transferred to the local state school. It's the biggest college or university in my state. It used to be a little commuter school, just like one step above the community college, but now it's like a big university. It's got a law school now and all sorts of stuff. And right now he's going there and he's majoring in music education. And so he's on his path. It took him a while, but he got through. But that was a pretty painless way to get into college, frankly. I mean, it was painful for him because he was going through so much hormonally and emotionally, but you can do that. And I've heard since then of people doing this. You unschool your kid, and then when they get to be a teen, they think, oh, wait, I have to do something with my life. I want to be, I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a doctor. I want to, be a journalist or something like that. And then they get interested in college because that's one of the things you got to do to get there, right? And so you dual enroll them in the community college, and they literally do not have to have done anything formal before that because at least for my community college, they test you. And you're either at the remedial level, the regular level, or you're, what do they call it? Some higher level. I can't remember now what they call it. It's not coming to me. But anyway, and so, if you get in the remedial level, you know what happens? You just learn everything. They just teach you math from, the very first principle on, 1 + 1 = 2. And so you can catch up. It's easy to catch up. And then after you've done a couple of years of community college, you just transfer to a 4-year college. So you really can do it. You can unschool to college, basically. And you can go on with your life and you can have a fine life and you don't need all this other stuff. It's getting long already, so let me see if I can wind up in 2 minutes. The hardest college that we had, so I have 5 kids. My oldest went to the University of Dallas, and then she came home and she went to Marymount University and got a master's in education. She's a school teacher right now. My second child, my oldest son, really wanted to go to Berklee College of Music. He had a music teacher that had gone there, and he really, really wanted to go. And it's very, very hard to get into. It's very expensive. We spent more money on him than any of the other kids. But he got in. I think it was 13% acceptance rate for that, the applications, and he got in. And he even got a small scholarship. And so he went there. And that was not a college. That wasn't a Catholic experience. And for him, it was okay because I knew he was very solid in his faith and he worked better. It was better for him to have to resist the culture rather than be sort of forced by the culture. Like, he wouldn't have liked Christendom because that would have felt confining to him. He already had a really strong faith. So what am I trying to say? That he's like me. I'm like that too. I'm best if I'm in relief, against, is that the word I want? Where I have to think things through because I'm not in an environment that would naturally support me. So it worked out for him. He did really well. It was a good experience for him. My next son, though, I tried to do this collaborative method And he didn't know what he wanted. He didn't have any motivation. He really burned me out. And this is where I wasn't an unschooler. I forced him to go through the same steps that his older two siblings had done, which had worked so well with him. And it was like pulling teeth. It was really hard getting him through it. And then he did apply and go to Christendom, but he only made it a year. He was miserable. He did not like it. He wasn't doing well in his grades whatsoever. People at Christendom were so nice, really nice. I mean, he appreciated the learning experience there. He just wasn't into college. He tried again to go to community college, just wasn't into it. But he's been gainfully employed at a sailing marina. And he's worked up from a seasonal dockhand to supervisor, where he's now doing their accounting and stuff like that. So he's been steadily employed. He likes his job. He'll get there. I think he's a really late bloomer, but I think he'll get there, hopefully. Then my next son is now at school studying music education, and my youngest is going to Catholic University, and she's studying psychology. She was a very academic kind of person. She's very driven. She wants to be get a PhD and be a doctor in psychology. She's very studious. She's, straight A's and stuff like that. She just came out that way. She's just, just on fire. She's my little spitfire. So that is my experience with college and high school. If you have any questions about it, just put it in the comments, and I hope you find this helpful and reassuring, and God bless. Talk to you later. Bye.